Hello and good morning and afternoon, evening, depending on where you are zooming in from. Jemima, thank you so much for that background music, which is in tribute to Charles Kojo, known as Daddy Lumbar. He was a popular highlife musician who sadly died over the weekend, and Ghana is in mourning. The song is, we come to this world to do our best, and when the time is due, we go. The song is therefore dedicated to his memory. Thanks so much. Sorry if I feel a bit emotional today. He happened to be one of my favorite musicians. And as you can see, I'm in black in mourning. Okay, to business. For those who do not know me, I am Ruby Golo, and I look after the Global Chamber Accra Metro. I also run a consulting firm called Global Trade Consult, and we help companies expand internationally. Few housekeeping. Please keep your microphones on mute unless you are called to speak. But feel free to network using the chat room. And of course, you can post your contact details so others can reach out to you directly. Global Chamber is the only chamber that operates in many countries around the world. Our business is to help companies connect with trusted business people. And so if you like what we do here today and want to know more and how to join our global tribe, then please feel free to talk to me or our Deputy Director, Sharon Matike, who is also in the audience. Exporting to new markets can be very challenging, but to make the journey smoother, it requires that you follow some fundamental steps to be successful. In Africa, we do have lots of exportable products that can earn us foreign exchange, which can help boost our individual economies as well. That is why we are so fortunate to have Salim Mohammed of Lodridge in UK to present to us on the topic, learning the fundamentals of exporting to the UK. On this note, I invite Salim to take the floor to introduce himself and present to us. So, Chimama, if you can give him permit him to share his screen. Salim, please take it away.
Hi everyone, I hope everyone's well. So thanks for the introduction, Ruby, appreciate it. So yeah, my name's Salim and I'm the I'm founder and the CEO of Luggage Limited, which is an international trade intermediary service based here in the UK, London to be specific. So what we do is we connect individuals, logistic partners, suppliers and regulatory bodies, and also consulting in between international trade. So yeah, I'm just going to try to share my screen so you could see the slides behind me. Just give me a minute whilst I try to figure this out. Or maybe I might need permissions actually. Is anyone from the admin able to give me permission to share my screen so I could
Yes,
show
you
the
can
slides?
share.
Yeah, you can share.
You can share.
I'm trying to see, but it's not.
Would you want us to project it for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be easier. Maybe
And then you
something
just
to
say
do with my
next, and then we
settings.
move to.
All right, cool, yeah.
Okay, hold on just one moment. Hold on. Just give me a few minutes.
I'll try to sort it out on my end. Well, yeah, in the meantime, whilst we're trying to figure it out. So basically today's webinar is going to be based on the fundamentals of importing into the UK. Obviously, as we all know that UK is one of the largest economies in the world, and it's a very competitive market, and there's also like a lot of opportunity. But in order to be able to capitalize on the opportunities, you have to get the fundamentals right, and which is why obviously today's presentation is going to be very insightful. So yeah, once we get the slides on the way, I'll start breaking it down to you bit by bit. Hopefully you should get some sort of insight, and towards the end, I've left some space for questions as well. All right, so
Can you
yeah.
see my screen now?
Yeah, so obviously I think we've got the introduction out the way. Let's go to the first slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so today's focus is going to be around these four key things, because this is exactly what you need if you're planning on importing into the UK. Number one, you have to identify your market. Number two, you have to ensure that your products are compliant for the market. Number three, logistics is important, because if you're planning on trading internationally, your goods need to get from A to B. So that's an important subject as well. And then number four being managing your distribution chain. Next, please. So the first being market research. One thing that you need to understand is who is buying, what's the demand, is there a demand for these products, who your competitors are, how much value can you deliver? Because value comes in different forms. Sometimes it's in a form of pricing, sometimes it's quality, or maybe what you have is just rare in the market. And also understanding your competitors, well, you sit in the, whether it's high end or middle range, these things are understand. And obviously, most importantly, you need to understand your customer, their needs, because essentially that is bringing business. So once you identify who your customer is and what they require, you can move forward to the next step. Identify market, because especially found in the industry.
Salim, I think you are breaking up. I don't know if you want to turn off your camera for quality.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
I think because I've got two open. But yeah, should I start again, or did you catch most of what I said?
If you can start from this slide, that would be great.
Yeah. All right. So basically, what I was saying was that market research is very important, because essentially, if you don't understand the market, or if you do not market whatever country you're trying to export to, then essentially nothing else matters. So it's important that you do your research beforehand. A lot of people, obviously, as business owners, we have the tendency of thinking that our products are the best for the market, which I'm not saying that they're not. However, is you understand whether or not there's a market for it. And also in that market, you need to understand your buyers. How do they think? What's their key metrics in terms of decision making? You also need to understand what the demand is, because sometimes there's a market, but maybe there's no demand for it, and products could sit on shelves for months on end. And if it's edible products, they're going to have an expiry date. So these are things that you need to understand, and also analyzing your competitors, understanding who they are, what they do well. This will also help you deliver your product in the market. So market research, I'd always put that in front of anything. Before you think about importing or exporting a product into the market, you need to understand what the market demands. You also need to be quite honest with the times there might not be demand for your product in the market, which is fine. You could always find another market for your product. So these are key things that you need to understand. So once you've understood what the market requires, I've actually put some tools in this slide where you could search. If you're looking at the slide, if you could look at these online platforms, you should be able to doing some analysis based on your product. Some of the e-commerce platforms, when you go in there, you could understand what sells in the country. You'll get an insight of, okay, this is what doesn't sell. And yeah, it's just important to make sure that you get your market research first before you venture out, because you don't want to invest too much time and energy to your resources that potentially won't sell in the market, or you want to have the right approach to the market as well. We'll move to the next slide. So yeah, once you've understood where the market, just to give you an indication of the do well in this current market, and especially from Ghana, a lot of access to like raw materials, a lot of access to fresh produce. So these are some of the things that will do quite well in the UK, which is health and foods. I'm sorry, health foods and superfoods as well, especially like with superfoods at the moment, there's an uprise for it. And the other thing is as well, it's like cocoa, shea, like these are things that do quite well in the market. Obviously, that's me, doesn't remove the fact that you still have to go back and do your own research. So these are things that are currently being sold, and I reported over 2.5 billion of UK imports came from fruits and nuts, which is a huge margin if you look at it. Like in that segment, there must be some. So yeah, once you've understood that and you've kind of, this gives you a gauge of what sort of things would sell in the UK, especially being from Ghana. So move on to the next to start getting into some formalities or some of the principles of what required. So once you've understood that there's a market for your product, these are some of the key things that you need to understand. Labeling, your labeling has to be clear. If you get it in English writing as well, depending on who your customers are, especially if you're selling products, these things have to be very clear, because if you do not get it right, and for example, you're selling goods potentially people could be allergic to or allergies to, these have to be highly stipulated. So these things, when you're labeling and when you're packaging your product, it's very important to make sure you highlight exactly. Also, it will also help you within the market, because as I mentioned, it's a very competitive market. You do have quite a lot of similar products, so you want to give your customer as much information as possible. Other thing being product safety and transparency. These are the things that I've mentioned. Transparency is very key, because you might think, for example, like, oh, maybe I could bypass this or I could bypass that, but essentially it will be revealed, because as I mentioned, it's a very competitive market. And if you're doing quite well, your competitors are going to look into it. Compliance as well is very key in the UK. So main thing you need to understand is, are you compliant for the market? What does it require for your product? So if it's a food, for example, or fresh produce, you need to understand what certification you need to go along with that. Who certifies that product? And look into these things in key details, because that could be your make or break moment. You might have a perfect product, but if it's not compliant for that market, then essentially it won't even get through the borders for you to be able to sell it. So compliance is always top of the list. So once you've understood that you have your market, make sure your product is compliant for that market. And for example, if you're asking like, oh, how do I know what regulations are there for my products? Now, the easiest thing I'd suggest to do is consult with a customs agent. Once you've understood your product and you know the HS code for it, your customs agent could give you all the requirements for that product, in down to how much taxes you're going to be paying on that product. So therefore you could calculate and value your product at the right price, because these are the things that when we're preparing for exports, sometimes we choose to neglect, or maybe not choose to neglect, we just neglect because we think like, okay, my product takes X amount to make, so if I sell it for X amount, I'm making profit straight away. But understanding these key things would help you a lot in terms of pricing your product and also understanding what's required. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to ship something that's not going to be accepted into the country. Again, especially if it's anything food related, there's a lot of stipulations around it, especially since like COVID, we understand the dynamics of these things. So yeah, the easiest things to do is consult with a customs agent. If you do not have a customs agent in the UK present, the other thing that you can do is look at the tariff book. It's available online. You can always search it online. It's free, but it's difficult to navigate. If you've never navigated this tool before, it's going to be extremely difficult. And obviously, the other thing that you could also do is engage with intermediary service like ourselves. We would help you find out the regulations for your product and the requirements for it. So yeah, moving forward is the certifications that build trust. These certificates that I've mentioned on this slide help identify or it helps the buyer recognize that you are an established partner. Because one thing that you have to remember is when people are looking to import, for example, they might have not met you personally, so they don't know what practices that you undergo. You could be undergoing child labor, unethical trade. There's a lot that goes into these things. And then on top of that, as we all know, that there is a lot of scammers in trade. So when people are looking to import, these are sort of the certifications that they would ask for because it gives them confidence. Because no one that's no majority of the time scammers will not go through the processes that it takes to obtain some of these certificates because it requires a lot. In some cases it requires someone visiting your site, taking samples, looking at your products for them to be able to certify you. Yes, I get it might be a bit of a headache and you might have to spend in terms of getting your product certified, but in the market, it helps a lot because again, it gives the buyer confidence and that's who you want to please at the end of the day. How you have to look at it is that the majority of your customers haven't met you personally. How do they know that your goods meet the requirements that they're after? For example, if you had an electrical problem in your house and I was to come into your house saying that I'll fix the problem, I'm not an electrician. How would you know that I'm qualified? If I've got a certificate to show you and I've got my qualifications alongside you, it enables you to trust me to be like, all right, you could work on my house. This is how these things work. So it's the same thing in this industry as well. Your certificates show your customers that yes, we are more than capable and we do abide by these laws and we also do abide by these standards because again, it's a standards thing. Like it basically shows that you're up to par and you're able to compete in the market. Because remember, again, no one wants, especially if they're importing it for the sake of reselling or trade, they need to be able to trace these things back for themselves. So it does need to be up to the standard. And again, going back to what I previously mentioned, if you're not sure in regards to what would be required, go refer back to what I've previously mentioned in terms of engage with a customs agent or engage with someone, a trade consultant that will be able to analyze the situation and help you or guide you in a way that you are ready for the market. Because as I mentioned, it's a very competitive market and you cannot afford to miss a step because sometimes we might just have that one chance to make our mark because once people understand that you're not reputable, it's very hard to make a second impression then because initially they might be sold like yes the prices match up, you've got the quantity that we need, you've got the quality that we need, but then when it comes to the formalities you're lacking, that might have been your only chance to impress that specific buyer. So it's very important that we get these things correct to begin with. So yeah, we'll move on to the next slide. And this is more to do with logistics, because once we've figured out that we're fit for market, there's a market for our product. Yes, we're very compliant at this point. We need to understand how are we going to manage our logistics efficiently? How are we going to get our products, let's say from Accra to London, for example? And the only way to do that is by understanding logistics. Now, we all have it's a we all might have limited understanding as to what to do, but there are professionals out there, there are logistics companies out there that you can engage with at whatever level you're in. Again, you do have consultants out there, including ourselves, that will help you understand where you are and what you need to do in order to get your products from A to B. However, it does help if you understand it yourself, because sometimes it can be very difficult trying to ask for help when you don't really know exactly what you need help. So simple things, just from, for example, understanding what port or what airport you're going to be shipping to. These simple things help, because when you engage with customers, they're going to ask, so how do you manage your logistic process? How do you accept us to take the whole burden where we are in charge of logistics? And what you have to bear in mind is majority of your customers might not have the capacity, and they will move on quickly to someone who does have the capacity to help them out in this field, especially if they're starting out themselves. So understanding like logistics, understanding customs, what it takes to clear. Again, what I've mentioned this earlier, engaging with customs agents, engaging with freight forwarders. This would allow you to to create a logistic process that would work well with your product. Because what you have to remember is every product has different requirements. So, for example, if you're selling fresh produce, the the lifeline is very short. So you need to understand maybe sea freight might not be the best option for your product, depending on what stage. Yes, you can use sea freight for produce as well, but these are the things you need to understand what your buyer requires. Maybe your buyer requires immediate, like I'm purchasing it today and by tomorrow I'm expecting it to be in my warehouse. These are the things that you have to understand. Look at the ports that do take in your products, that handle, because every port and every airport have their specialties in terms of the type of goods that they handle or how quick it. Yes, they might all have the capacity to handle certain things, but then when you start doing your research, you'd find that maybe in some ports, goods get cleared a lot quicker. So it might be worthwhile, even though the port might be further away from your customer, but it might be worthwhile shipping to that port, because at least then it's in the country and all they have to do is arrange a pickup from the port to their warehouse. So these are the things that you need to understand. And again, understanding intercoms, this is another thing that you need to understand. Intercoms allow you to exchange liability between you and your customer. So, for example, you might not want to take liability, or you might not want to be responsible for the goods once it reaches a port in England. Let's just say Southampton, for example. So by the time you get to Southampton, after that, you may not want liability. This is where you have to have the right intercoms, because at that point in time, that is where this will be communicated. If anything was to go wrong, you could always look back at the contract. You could always look back at the invoice and it will tell you that, okay, this was our agreement to begin with. Again, if you do not understand intercoms, engage with logistic partners, because they've done it for a lot of these companies out there have done it for many years and will be able to advise you correctly. So yeah, we'll move on to the next slide. Is sorry, just to get a bit of feedback, is everything making sense so far?
It is indeed. Carry on.
Yeah. So yeah, previously as to like what I mentioned is, in terms of freight and logistics, you need to understand what works well for your product and what stage you're at. So these are some examples that I've put out there. Like for example, a 20-foot container, for example, if you put your goods into a 20-foot container, it's going to be very cost effective compared to air freight. However, you do have to bear in mind that it's going to take roughly about a month or longer to get to your customer. So if your goods are perishable, you have to consider that in mind. Are they going to survive 6 weeks or 4 weeks in a container? These are the things that you need to understand. Yes, it's going to be cost effective for you, but are they going to last that long? The other option that you have out there, obviously, as I mentioned previously, is air freight. Now, air freight typically usually costs a lot more, but again, going back to what you're shipping, this is what it might require. So you need to price accordingly. So when you're doing your pricing, these are the factors that come into play. These are the things that you might want to understand because remember when I was talking about market research, like you might come to find out that there's a market for your product. You might come to find out that yes, you can be compliant for that region, but the thing is you need to also calculate your freight costs because this would let you know whether or not it's worth it shipping into that country um or establishing business in that country. So these are the sort of things that you need to bear in mind. And then obviously with couriers, when it comes to sampling, it's usually a lot easier to use couriers. For example, if you're sending samples out, you can put it in a container, you could consolidate the shipment, but again, have you got a month to wait? Whereas you could use courier services like DHL, FedEx, UPS. I'm not too sure on what options are exactly what options are available in Ghana, but there is going to be courier options available as to where you could send individual products. You could just send out a parcel. And in this case, it might cost you a lot if you're looking in terms of like quantity wise. It might cost you more than usually, but it's a lot easier for them to pick up that package and ship it out to your customer. Once your customer's seen it and they're happy with it, then you can look at the other modes of transport. So again, it all comes back to you. You need to understand your products. You need to understand exactly what it needs for that time period. So these are just some of the options that you could start looking at. So yeah, with that said, we'll move on to the next slide. Once you've worked out your logistics, now we're at the point where we understand that there's a market for a product. We understand the compliance behind it. We understand the logistics behind it. The other thing that you do need to figure out is how are you going to distribute your product? There's many methods into how you could do it. So these are some of the methods I've highlighted. Number one being direct to retail or wholesaler. Obviously, you need to understand who your main customer is going to be. Are they going to be a retailer or are they going to be a wholesaler? Or both. In some cases, it might be both. Or is it going to be an individual buyer, as in maybe your customer is just an individual buyer. They buy it for their own use, whatever your product may be. But these are things that you need to understand because once you've understood it, again, it helps you strategize on how you're going to access the market. So, for example, if your main customer is going to be a wholesaler, let's say you're selling mangoes, it's so easy to go on Google and type in mango wholesaler in London, for example, and you will get a bunch of wholesalers that will pop up on Google and you can start your outreach that way. It's simple because you understand who you're selling to. The other thing is in also obviously online platforms. A lot of people in this day and age use e-commerce platforms, your Amazons, your eBay, depending on what you're selling. Again, you need to understand what their requirements are and how to access these platforms for them to be able to distribute your product. The other thing, number three, is you do have distributors and you do have agents. So when you approach a distributor or an agent and you're, for example, it's like, I have this amazing product, I want to sell it into the market. They are going to do the work for you in most cases. they're going to look at what options are best. So they would approach the retailers on your behalf. So if you do not have the capacity, for example, to go direct to retail or go direct to wholesale, at this point in time, you might want to engage a distributor or an agent that will help you market your product and will help you sell your product. Obviously, it's not going to be free. You're going to have to work out what the costs are between you and that specific distributor or the agent. And then number four is events. But the thing is with events, what you have to be prepared to travel. There are events around the UK throughout the year, depending on what industry that you're in. So, for example, if you're in agriculture, again, you could look at online and see what events are there for agriculture. And if you choose to exhibit in that event, you get to meet so many potential partners, potential clients. You get to meet so many of them in these events. However, obviously, it does come at a higher cost, and you do have to be prepared to travel and engage in real time. But the upside is you get to meet people face to face. So it gives you direct access to market from the point of view of you've met them in person, you're now acquainted. It's probably going to be a lot easier for you to sell to them, but you just have to gauge it whether or not it's going to be worth it for you in terms of pricing, in terms of obviously depending on what your schedule is, or maybe you might have to get a team member. But this is an option. And it's not just in the UK. There's networking events all around the world. So whatever market that you're looking at, you could always search for events and try to exhibit at that event, which will give you direct access to. Because one thing that you have to remember with these events is every single person that would attend that particular event is interested in that industry. So it gives you a higher margin as to, for example, let's say posting your product online. Majority of the people that might come across your product might not be interested. Whereas with events, it gives you direct access because if you go to a car show, for example, 99% of the people at the car show are obviously interested in cars. Otherwise, they would have not made the time and effort to be there. Yes, you are going to get some people that just popped up because they never had anything else to do. But you are putting yourself right in front of your potential clients and your potential partners. My suggestion to everyone would be pick a channel, find one channel. Once you've seen that it works for you and it's valid, you could scale from there. Trying to enter a market using various channels is going to be very challenging for yourself because they all have different demands. For example, if you're going direct to retail, then your retail price and your wholesale price is always going to be different, for example. So you need to kind of decipher who you're trying to target, just to simplify it from your point of view, because it's very hard to please everyone. Again, if you're using online platforms, these are the things that you need to understand. They all have their different requirements. They might require you to ship, let's say, 1,000 units to sit in their warehouse. So at this point in time, you haven't made any sales and you've had to bear the expenses of shipping it to their warehouse. And again, you have to understand whether or not you have the capacity for it. So picking a single channel to begin with is going to be very crucial. If it doesn't work for you, you could always pivot into another channel, but trying to target everything all in one go is going to be extremely difficult to track and measure what's working and what's not, as they all have different demands. So yeah, once obviously we've understood that, we'll go to the next and final slide. Based on what we've spoken about, what does success look like? So your success relies on your product being fit for the market. Once you've understood that there's a market for your product and it's in demand, And you also understand that it's allowed and you're compliant within the market. Obviously, at this point in time, we're talking about the UK. You're compliant with all the UK regulations. You're compliant with the UK market. Once we've understood that, is then going into how do we strategize in terms of logistics? How do we strategize in terms of setting up our distribution center? Once you've worked out all these things, you're now able to export into that market and be successful into that market. Now, everything that I've mentioned so far within this presentation, all these are principles. If you follow these principles one by one, you would be able to gauge whether or not this is something that you want to do. However, the formalities still apply. You don't get to decide whether or not your product is compliant for that market. If it needs certain certificates, you have to go through the right channels to acquire those certificates. I can't say I've got a product, so now my product is good for everyone or it would work in that market because I've tried it, it's safe for me. It doesn't mean that it's going to be safe. You still need to undergo particular tests, and there are examining bodies out there that would be able to examine your product and decide whether or not it's fit for the market. So these are some of the things that you need to understand. Yes, you might have all the principles in intact, but you still need to understand the formalities that go alongside with it. I'll break down the formalities, but unfortunately, there's just not enough time to go over every single thing. And as we are aware, legislations change all the time. Some of the things that I didn't mention in this as well is down to trade agreements. So when you are looking to import into the UK, it's good to understand that whether or not there's any preferential trading for your product, because that would allow you, again, it all goes back to pricing. You could understand how much money you're saving, so on and so forth. But all these things are important, but getting the principles right, you yourself, you would know whether or not that's a market that you want to pursue, because a lot of the time is, as business owners, like I mentioned earlier, we have huge aspirations. Not only we have huge aspirations, we just tend to think that our product is perfect for pretty much every market. But these are the things that we need to consider. So before you think about exporting, understand your market. Because a lot of the time it's like you'd have your product and it's like you just want to get it out there as quick as possible. But understanding your market will save you a lot of time, because if, for example, there's no market, then at least you know you don't have to look in that direction. But once you've understood the market, once you've understood the compliance and legislation, and you're ready for it, again, this will help you navigate that landscape or navigate that market. Whereas again, when you have your product and you just want to get it out there, it's very difficult, because if you haven't done the groundwork beforehand, you're missing the mark on a lot of points. So these are the key things that you have to look into, specifically if you're trying to import into the UK, or sorry, export to the UK. These are the principles that you need to understand. And lastly, obviously, I've mentioned, yeah, this slide just talks about what Luggage does as a company and what we can help you with. Sorry, Rubis, the next slide. So these are the things that we do as a company. Again, everything is subject to availability. From freight planning to customs, we are intermediaries, so we're able to connect you with the right freight partners and customs. And obviously, before everything, we're able to analyze where you are as a business and strategize for you from beginning to end. From when, if, for example, you're not export ready yet, we could look at that and analyze it and explain to you what your next steps should be. So these are the sort of things that we could do for you. But again, it's not it's not to say that we're able to do this for everyone, because in some cases we may not have the capacity in terms of the amount of time it takes. For example, if you're looking to connect with UK buyers, there's times when we do have the capacity for it, and then when obviously as a business, if we're really busy, promising to find you buyers is a daunting task, because essentially we have to do the marketing for you, we have to do the market research for you as well, and we have to engage with buyers for you. Essentially what does tend to happen is we do get buyers who would approach us, for example, and they might say, "Oh, we're looking for cocoa beans, or we're looking for coffee, or where can you help us source it?" And in that scenario, obviously, if we're already acquainted with you, naturally, what we tend to do is go with our immediate network. But as I mentioned, these are the things that we can help you with, and our contact details are also on the slide. So yeah, thank you for listening, and that's it from me. If you have any questions or any input you'd like to make, or if there's anything I've missed out, please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much. That was a brilliant presentation, and thanks for sharing. The floor is open. Feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. You can also put it in the chat box and we can read it out. So the floor is open.
Okay.
Can I also ask that those who have only their first name, if you can add your last name so we can address you properly. Thank you.
It's either I've delivered this presentation really well, or everyone
It
fell
looks
asleep.
like you have really delivered it. So everybody is
It's one of
quiet.
the others.
I may call on people if people don't raise their hands. Hi, Jamil. I see you are in the room. Would you want to make any comment? I know you are in the custom space, specifically for the US.
Hi, Ruby. Sorry, I didn't get to see the whole presentation. I just popped on a little later. I was supposed to be on a call. But I'm very happy that Salim is here. I actually connected him with Global Chamber, so I'm very happy about that.
Yeah.
Um, basically,
Hi, Jamil. You're right.
how are you? I'm very
I'm
happy.
fine, thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy that he's speaking today. A lot of regulations, I think, kind of going along with what he's saying. You basically just want to prepare in advance, honestly. I think preparing in advance, working together with different strategic partners like Salim, myself, and some other people in here really helps you prepare to avoid any issues when you're importing or exporting. Get familiar with the regulations in each country because we all have different regulations. You're going to make sure your items aren't prohibited because some countries have restrictions. Just plan ahead in advance and you should be fine. It might be a lot of paperwork, but you'll be fine if you plan ahead in advance. I'm sorry I'm not on, my eyes a little swollen today, so I'm not on camera today, but thank you guys for doing this today.
Thank you for your inputs. We appreciate that.
Thank
I think
you, Jamil.
we have a question from Dan Mafo. He says, "Do you help select appropriate SIC code based on products for UK?"
All right, so in that scenario, we'd have to look at the product specifically, but what we'll do is we'll identify your products and identify what SIC codes or what HA codes go alongside with it. But I always advise to verify with a customs agent, because our understanding, it may be very accurate, but you always have to cross check it, because essentially it's not us that gets to decide the end result, if that makes sense. So you always have to cross check with the body that does decide that end result. From our research, we might find this is the correct code for your product. However, when you do try to ship it, you might come to find out, because again, these things are very intricate, and you need to, obviously, depending on that product. So let's say the product consists of various materials. These could change the nature of the code. So again, that's what we would do in that scenario is we would look at what products are, so what codes are related to your product, but we'll still have to check with the right bodies. It's not something that we decide in-house, if that makes sense. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We do have another one. It says, what practical steps would you recommend for a small African business to assess its export readiness before approaching a market like the UK? And I just want to comment on that. I think Salim mentioned that market research is key. And for me, in my, as global trade consults, we kind of offer market research so that we can try to gather some data to see whether your products are indeed ready for that market. So I will hand it over to Salim. I just thought that I will just comment on that. So over to you, Salim, if you want to add on to.
Yeah, it's pretty much what you said, because this is why I was emphasizing on market research and understanding where you are in the market. So for example, if let's say you've never exported before, you need to understand if there's a market for your product in that country. And then the other thing is you need to understand is what are their requirements. Again, we don't dictate what their requirements are. We're not governmental bodies. We're not, as business owners, we just have to comply with what's out there. Yes, we might see our products as fit for market, but we need to understand what their requirements are and then work on making sure that we meet the requirements. So that's just the practical steps that I would take. So for example, if you need, let's say your product requires a specific certificate in order for it to pass customs, you would look at what the certificate is. You would look at who certifies you, i.e. who gives you the certificate, and you would approach them, and obviously they'll put you under test, whatever your product is. If you pass those tests, whether it's samples or whatever tests that they decide are appropriate, if you pass those tests and you're now certified, yes, you're able to enter that market. But essentially, you always want to work backwards. You want to ensure that you're meeting their requirements as opposed to you setting your standards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think another important question to, as an additional to this, would be for small businesses, because she mentioned small businesses. I think she also meant what requirements are there for small businesses? Can anybody export to the UK? Do you need an export license? Supposing we have an artisanal manufacturer in Cameroon or Ghana, an artisanal food producer, for example, what level of business must you be doing to be able to export? Of course, you shouldn't also, as a business owner, you shouldn't also just get up and then be exporting to markets when you haven't, of course, done your market research and looking for who is buying the goods, because why are you exporting when you don't have a buyer? But I think the other question that comes from this is, what do you need to be? How do you have a fixed revenue, a requirement? Do you need, what do you do? Do you need to get an export license? Can any small and medium scale business export to the UK? I don't know, but I think that's also something to ask.
Yeah,
If you
so
can give me answers to that.
essentially would always go back to the intent. So if you're exporting for commercial purposes, you need to highlight, again, everything is product specific, but you don't need an export license for everything. But in some cases, if you are exporting commercially, you do need an export license. As
Export
you
license.
mentioned, as a small business, yes, maybe you don't have the volume. So essentially, you could just pass it off as, I'm just shipping this off to a family member. But what you have to remember is, how do you scale that? Yes, maybe you might do
Okay.
the one off, but it's always important, especially in markets that are established like the UK. You need to follow the formalities from day one, because number one, it will allow you to understand how things work. And when the volume does pick up, you are ready for that market. Because yes, let's say at the moment you're only shipping one item and you've just passed it off as, yeah, I'm shipping this off to a family member. What if tomorrow you get an overload of orders? Now, rather than sending one item, it's 1,000 units are required. At this point in time, you're not going to be ready because you've cut corners. So essentially, you need to again, if your product requires you to have a commercial export license, look at how to obtain these licenses. Even if you're not doing that trade volume or that might be passed off as commercial yet, it's very important to get these steps correctly, because I could only imagine as a small business, you're not planning to stay small forever, if that makes sense. So some things, yes, you may be able to get away with at this point in time, but you've always got to go back to the intent. Because once this now becomes a regular occurrence, because what you have to remember is these things are logged in. Everything you ship something, it's logged. So now if that volume is getting more frequent and you're just passing it off as if this is just a shipment to my cousin or brother or whoever, it's not going to take too long before they clock on this is a commercial transaction. And at that point in time, you would have lied on so many things, if that makes sense. So it might not be serious, but you have to look at the longevity of your business. Would you rather do a one-off transaction to just quickly secure the sale, or do things right? It does take long. Yes, you've got to obtain a license and so on and so forth. But in the long run, it safeguards your business, if that makes sense. So,
Thank you. We do have another question from Genevieve. She says, I have products based on woven cloth, fashion accessories, soft furnishing, and fancy beads. I guess it's a small business. Any help or leads to UK or US? So Salim, if you want to take that, and probably Jamel, if you are still on the call.
what I'd ask is, you said soft furnishing and fancy beads. Are these beads like clothing in terms of like accessories, or are they for like furniture, just for decoration? But in terms of leads, again, it goes back to market research, because in order for you to identify leads is understand who your competitors are. So in terms of help of getting leads, it will go back to the same thing that I mentioned earlier. I don't currently have any leads off the top of my head as to who you can approach with that. However, if you do your market research, you could identify who your potential clients are going to be, if that makes sense. If you needed more of an insight, we might be able to connect, but it's not something that I could answer off the top of my head, or like say, okay, I could connect you with this person off the top of my head. But those are the steps that I would personally take.
Yeah, Genevieve, I hope that helps. Otherwise, after the event, let's connect and have a chat, and then we'll see how we can support you.
Ruby, you're
I think you're
muted.
mute.
You're unmute, Ruby.
Oh, sorry. Hi. We are almost top of the hour. I don't know if you have more questions. Feel free to raise your hands. pop it in the chat room. Jamil, I don't know if you want to comment regarding US, what is possible in the US?
Sorry, Ruby, I missed your question. Oh, you're on mute right now.
Sorry. Genevieve asks what applies to the US. So I am wondering if you want to comment on that as well.
In reference to free trade agreements?
No,
Oh, you're on
basically,
mute.
she was asking. Oh, sorry, I'm not too sure if it was he or she. Apologies, I didn't get the name. Or is it Genevieve? I'd imagine it's she. But yeah. So
Genevieve,
she was
would you
asking
want
that.
to take the mic and ask your question? Anyway,
Hello,
yes, go ahead.
I'm unmuted. Yes, I do fashion accessories, what we call kente soles or kente shawls from Ghana. And then I have soft finishing, woven cloth from La Côte d'Ivoire and from Burkina Faso. Those are used for apparel and for soft finishing also. So I'm asking if I could find any leads, existing leads that you are aware of already. But I'll take your offer, Ruby, and then talk to you later. Okay?
All right. Speak
Thank you very
soon.
much. Thank you very much.
So is this leads in reference
Okay.
to getting buyers? Is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, it's just through networking.
I've sold to a lady from the US before who came down to Accra and was shopping, and she took some of my shawls and then the table runners. Yes, she came from New Jersey. New Jersey, yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
it's all through networking, honestly. You just got to network. I don't know anyone in particular that's looking for that, but the more you network, the more exposure you'll get. So I would say keep networking. You should meet someone.
Thank you for that. Ivy, I see you say you have a question. You can ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Joined pretty late, but I wanted to find out from Salim. Is he helping us with the market research to access to the market, or he's just what linkage is he along the chain? Is he playing? If we contact him by his contact details, what exactly is he? What service is he going to provide for us? I don't know what service, because I actually joined pretty late when he was on the last slide. And with certification, is he going to assist us with certification? Because some of us are in the agribusiness.
Yeah, so most of the work that we actually do is within that industry, so agriculture, raw materials, and precious metals. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, but I think you mentioned you joined the call quite late. We're an intermediary service and also consultant service. So what we'll do, we look at every business on a case-by-case basis. So for example, you're at the point where you have, as you mentioned, is you have your goods, but you need help with market research. Then that is something that we could help you. Whether you want to strategize or you want us to help you in terms of how to do your market research, or you want us to do the market research for you, that's a different conversation. It's all based on what your business requires within the trade. So again, it could be because everyone's situation is different. In some situations that they already have the capacity in terms of they understand their customers, their goods are compliant, they just need help with logistics. And in that scenario, we'll just help them with logistics. But let's say we're starting from scratch. Everything that I mentioned within this slide, from market research up to distribution, is something that we can help with. However, it is down to capacity at the time of the inquiry. So again, if in that time period, let's say we are really occupied and we cannot conduct market research on your behalf, then what we would do in that case is advise you on how to take that market research or potentially connect you with someone that can do the market research for you. So again, it all goes back to the sort of help or assistance you need within trade, if that answers your question.
Okay. Thank you, Salim, for answering those questions. Unfortunately,
Hold on.
our time is up.
1 minute. 1 minute. Are we paying for the market research, and what's the cost? What's the cost involved?
Yeah, so Ivy, I think
Again,
what I will do is
yeah.
I'll put you in touch with Salim so you can take that discussion after this event. Is that okay? And Salim, I hope it's okay for us to share your presentation so those who came in late can actually go through it after this. Is that okay?
Yes, that's totally fine.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I hope that the presentation was helpful. Global Chamber Accra, our doors are open to support you as much as we can. Feel free to reach out to me or Sharon, our deputy, and we'll be happy to help you through your export journey. In closing, we will play back Daddy Lumbar's song as we continue to mourn his departure. Really a sad day for me, and I thank you all for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone, and thank you. We look forward to seeing you all next month.
Take care, Ruby. Thanks for
Thank you.
giving us the
Thank you
opportunity
so
to
much
present
for your
in front of
time.
Thank you
everybody.
so much for
I appreciate
attending.
it. Thank you. I hope you all have a good day, depending on where you are and what time it is. Okay. See you.
Yes. Hi, Jamil. I think she's on, but
Hey.
Small
Bye-bye. See you next month.
Thanks, Ruby. Okay.
Thank you, Jem. I appreciate all your support.
Yeah, see you next
Okay.
month.
Okay, bye. Bye, everyone.